systemic circulation or in the pulmonary circulation. The last one is an acute decompensation heart failure, meaning some patient has had severe heart failure or acute heart failure in the past, but with the proper management, the patient has reverted back to a stable phase. So this is called acute decompensated heart failure. Once they are decompensated, deteriorate. If they can be revived, they can go for a chronic phase or another phase. So these are clinical aspects to just clinically stage the patients. Now, with this background, these are a bit older background. Now, with this background, there are some recent categorization of heart failure. And this categorization has been done by considering the ejection fraction of the heart. And we know that the ejection fraction of the heart is one of the measure for systolic function of the heart, ejection fraction. So considering the ejection fraction and considering the different stages of developing heart failure, the heart failure has now been classified as first is a heart failure with a reduced ejection fraction. And conventionally, this rejection fraction, the rejection fraction has been termed as when the patient has his ejection or her ejection fraction less than 40%, with, and if they have got heart failure symptom, these patients are heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. On the other side of the scale is a heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, where the ejection fraction is well or more than 50%. So these are the two ends of the spectrum of dividing heart failure. But what about in the middle? Heart failure with ejection fraction of 40% to 49%, what will be that? This is again categorized as a mid-range ejection, heart failure with mid-range ejection fraction. So in the heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, we know much of it. We know slight of heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, and the knowledge regarding mid-range heart ejection fraction is still very poor. It's still very poor. So now, if we can see the proportion of the patients, the ejection fraction of heart failure with reduced ejection fraction around 40% of the patients ejection fraction, and they constitute around 50% heart failure patients. And heart failure, true heart failure patient with preserved ejection fraction is around 36. And mid-range is calculated as to be 41%. And one, we can see the patient with left ventricular ejection fraction in the range of 40 to 49 represents a gray area basically. And this has been termed as heart failure with mid-range ejection fraction. And this is the diagnostic criteria as has been described by the ESC. So all type of heart failure needs symptoms plus signs and their respective range of ejection fraction. For example, heart failure with reduced ejection fraction has signs and symptoms plus less than 40% ejection fraction. Heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, that was symptoms and signs plus ejection fraction more than 50%, and the mid-range between 40%. In addition, the heart failure with preserved ejection fraction and heart failure with mid-range ejection fraction has certain characteristics. For example, they should have elevated levels of natriuretic peptides. At least one in additional criteria is relevant structural heart disease, say for example, left ventricular hypertrophy or left atrial enlargement or diastolic dysfunction. So these are the practical or working diagnostic definition of the three group of heart failure. So before we start actual pathophysiology of the heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, let's see something of the cardiac cycle and the physiology of the diastole. And this is very, very basic from physiology knowledge. We can have the two alternative phases of the cardiac cycle. On the right side of the figure, you see the systolic phase, which contains of volumetric contraction ejection phase. And the more important for us at the moment is a diastole, which has got in fact four phases. One is isovolumetric relaxation phase, and the rapid filling phase, and another phase is diastasis and atrial contraction. Out of these four phases, the last three phases means rapid filling, diastasis, and atrial contraction. In these three periods, actually blood can move from atria to ventricle. And the main important of this diastolic function is the diastolic dysfunctions. And that is very important because left ventricular relaxation is important, and which if it impaired, then maybe possibly diastolic function will be impaired. So if diastolic function is impaired, then there will be increased pressure and there will be increased pressure. In the figure, you can see about 70 to 80% of the patient of the period is for early feeling period, and you can see a lot of factors which govern this one. For example, LA pressure, myocardial relaxation, and so many. There's systolic function, LA pressure, LA stiffness, LV stiffness, and sometimes functionality of the valve. And few others are atrial systole is contributing to 15 to 20%, and 5% is diastasis. So mostly, if you can see that when some patient develop diastolic dysfunction, many of the factors, they come into play and reduce the early repeat period as a whole. And if we see that, so the term is left ventricular diastolic dysfunction. And this main important fundamental mechanisms are the slowing of relaxation, as told earlier, and the less storing of the force and increased stiffness of the left ventricle. If you see in the right figure on the right side, the upper part is from the mechanical value where you can have the LV relaxation. Restoring of the force, these are normal values, and lengthening of the load. These three components of feeling will affect if there is dysfunction. So possible mechanisms are the structural heart disease like hypertrophy and say constriction or fibrosis, and functional is usually ischemic and other. So when these factors are came into play, so diastolic dysfunction may be. Now, this can be explained in a very easier way by a balloon and a football analogy. We can see the normal heart with normal elasticity, relaxation, everything, and we can compare this heart with a balloon. And this balloon is very small, and this can be very compliant rubber balloon, and we can easily fill this balloon in the mouth with the force from the mouth. But if you consider the patients with a stiff heart or say hypertensive heart or otherwise, where heart is very stiff, and this can be compared with the football. And in football, we cannot inflate the football with our mouth pressure. And many a times it needs an extra pump to be needed. So the upper part, the balloon part is the normal phenomena, and the lower part, the football part, is the phenomena where diastolic stiffening is more high, relaxation is lower, and erectile dysfunction is there. So now it comes to the proper heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, starting with the definition and some of the epidemiology. In Journal of Cardiac Disease 2017 definition, just this is a working definition. The heart failure with preserved ejection represents basically an heterogeneous collection of conditions. This is not a single condition like other disease. And these conditions are unified. For example, they must have an ejection fraction of more than 50%. There will be an evidence of impaired diastolic function and possibly some elevated nitrate peptide levels. And all of this will be in the typical context of heart failure signs and symptoms. And this is particularly is a large unmet clinical condition in cardiology throughout the lecture. So in the beginning, that I've got a subtitle that this particular heart failure is a growing global epidemic at the moment for the cardiologist. And there are certain risk factors, there might be some structural functional cardiac abnormalities will be there, and they actually results in reduced cardiac output, and intracardiac pressure will be increased either at rest or during stress. Basically, these patients are older people with diabetes, high BMI, smoking, atrial fibrillation are predictors. And the patients with who have got history of hypertension, atrial fibrillation, CKD, also likely to develop this particular disease more quickly. Epidemiologically, if you see that approximately the patient older than 65, they represent about 50% of the prevalent heart failure patient in the community. Uh, and the highest decile means those patients who are age is more than 90%, almost everybody will be living with heart failure with ejection fraction. And definitely this heart failure with ejection is associated with high mortality and morbidity due to their age, comorbid conditions, and the heart failure symptoms. Uh, about a 5-year survival is around 35%, worse than many cancers possibly. And the risk of death or heart failure increase with the increasing of comorbidity burden. So comorbidity burden is diabetes, hypertension, and other diseases. Patients with this disease are similarly high rehospitalization rate as with the heart failure patient with a reduced ejection fraction. And patients hospitalized and the discharge, 20% are readmitted within 30 days. And more than 50% will readmit into 1 year. So this is morbidity and mortality figure shows the tremendous load of this particular disease to the healthcare services delivery system of any country. Now, there's a two example. This example shows in the bar chart. This is due to a heart failure with reduced exemption. For last 3 decades, you can see the graph, the survival rate has improved, not very large, but definitely there is significant improvement by management, medications, and other. From 1987 to 2001, the survival rate is improved. But look on the right side, the patients with heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, from the same period, the survival rate is not significantly improved. Now, how this patient died, basically, mode of death. The cause specific mortality between these two groups is the data is highly variable. That there are differences between the data from RCTs and also from the register. But it's a common thing, important thing is that the non-cardiovascular death is significantly higher, for example, around 50%, than for the heart failure with a reduced ejection fraction, which is about 36%. Possibly this reflects that this particular patients have more comorbidity condition, aged people, possibly they may have got other cause of death than cardiovascular diseases. Now, look something about the pathophysiology of heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. Pathology actually there is a wide variety of phenotypes. This is not a single patient like diabetes, like hypertension, like rheumatic heart disease, not even like ischemic heart disease. This particular group has a wide variety of phenotypes resulting from different aspects of pathophysiological mechanism, comorbidities, dominant clinical characteristics, and that all these things make diagnosis and treatment extremely challenging. Patients with heart failure are generally older, as you have told earlier, predominantly women, and have got multiple comorbidities like hypertension, obesity, CAD, anemia, arterial fibrillation, diabetes, renal dysfunction, and sometimes patient may have got also sleep apnea. And all these basically comorbidities affect ventricular and vascular remodeling, which are essential for the development of heart failure with ejection fraction. So the basic mechanism actually, what this particular thing do, they changes in left ventricular relaxation and filling. They increase the left ventricular and retractile structure remodeling, and also they alter their geometry, increasing stiffness and decreasing in cardiac compliance. The changes in the left ventricular and systemic and pulmonary vascular compliance, skeletal muscles and endothelial change also been changed, and there are pro-inflammatory and pro-fibrotic signaling increases in these particular cases. So ultimately, they increase the left filling pressure, and with atrial pulmonary right ventricle levels, they also improve the upstream pathology in the right heart system. So what about the LV diastolic dysfunction in heart failure with preserved ejection fraction? Definitely the most common cause of heart failure with preserved ejection fraction is left ventricular dysfunction, secondary to the stiffness, hypertrophied heart. But we must remember, it is not the sole pathophysiological driver for this type of heart failure. It is important not to equate left ventricular systolic dysfunction with left ventricular heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, because many of the patient, older patients, are in an essentially normal general population people. We may detect left ventricular diastolic dysfunction. So, but the left ventricular diastolic dysfunction is caused by myocardial structural changes, microvascular dysfunction, systemic inflammation, and some sort of increased passive stiffness of the chambers. Now you see two aspects of this function: left ventricular diastolic volume and left ventricular filling pressure in heart failure with preserved ejection fraction during exercise and rest. On the left-hand figure, you see we compare two patients, normal patients, and with the patient. Normal patient you see in the pink, and the normal patient, patient heart failure with preserved ejection fraction in red. In the rest period, you can see they are more or less in the similar diastolic volume and in systolic volume. But after exercise, the normal patients increases the preload reserve, and also the ionotic vascular reserve also increase, comparing to the patients with left heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, where there is impaired stroke volume reserve, so they have got reduced changes in this. So this may be a very earlier situation where only diagnostic can be by diagnostic tests. On the right side, you can see what about the pressure, similar. For example, in this figure, during rest, you see the pressure of two pressure, one is left atrial pressure and left ventricular pressure. In the rest, you see the pressure curve in the lower pressure curve of the left atrium. When after exercise, you see the tremendous increase of the left atrial pressure. So during rest, this patient, particular patient, may not have any symptom, but after exercise or during exercise, their left atrial pressure will increase, and thereby they can give rise to symptoms. So sometimes these type of patients have symptoms in exercise, or their exercise capacity is lower, but they are asymptomatic in when they are in rest. So this is left ventricular reserve. Sometimes the ejection fraction is normal or near normal, but the systolic functions sometimes are found in normal. So this is not only diastolic dysfunction, but though not very common, many of the patients of this group may have got some sort of systolic dysfunction, may not have overt failure, but we call them subtle left ventricular systolic dysfunction, because this is a millimanor. For example, we'll come to later. So now see what about the chronology of development of heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. I've told earlier that the comorbidity on the left-hand side, most of the comorbidities present here, like for example, obesity, diabetes, hypertension, and some sort of renal dysfunction, and they can include the chronic systemic inflammation. The marker may be CRP, may be interleukin and others. And when this attack the multi-organ, they have different aspects. For example, in the lung, they can develop pulmonary function. They have got a skeletal muscle. They may have got sodium retention in the kidney. So when they involve the multi-organ, there are certain endothelial cardiomyocyte signaling system, which is very common. I'm going to detail, and ultimately within different signaling system inside the endothelium and myocytes, they go for fibroblasts. They affect the fibroblasts, microblasts giving collagen, and ultimately they develop hypertrophy and stiffness. If you go more detail in this particular picture, with the comorbidity on the left-hand side, the patient on the lower side, see there will be some systemic inflammation, and in systemic inflammation, the like high sensitivity CRP and other marker will increase. And when they go for endothelial cell, they get the primary injury to the microvessels, and microvascular inflammation and endothelial activation causes this endothelial mesenchymal transition in the myocytes. So these cardiomyocytes with the secondary cardiomyocyte injury, and they also develop some sort of vascular, coronary vascular involvement where nitric oxide is decreased. They lost or they reduce the vasodilatory properties, and ultimately they they develop, say, vasoconstriction, which may give rise to stiffness of the left ventricle and collagenization. And ultimately, with these mediators, the phenotype, different phenotype of heart failure with preserved ejection fraction has developed. So this is how, starting for comorbidities or without any disease, through organ involvement, through molecular system, they develop heart failure function. Again, they come as a morphological macroscopic changes. If we now consider this particular heart failure, in the general categorization, generalization of heart failure, say here on the left side, you see, if you compare this as a stage A of heart failure, here again, we may have what type of things we can get, particularly to this patient. We'll have risk factors for development of preclinical diastolic dysfunction. Remember, this is very important. Preclinical diastolic dysfunction is very important. Possibly this is a great signal for the physician to prevent the disease. If we lose it, maybe some of the patient will go for heart failure. So through this, there are certain comorbidities or risk factors I listed before, and I already have told you earlier, maybe acute coronary syndrome, age, hyperlipidemia, metabolic syndrome, so on. So once they progress to the stage B heart failure, so they develop preclinical diastolic dysfunction. And here again, we can have, if they join with these cardiovascular risk factors, non-cardiac risk factors also contribute here. For example, renal dysfunction, anemia, and COPD. So if they go farther, they can enter in the stage C or D, which is practically heart failure, and they develop actually heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. And though this is has been shown, so the development of diastolic dysfunction or this stage B, duration possibly is not well understood. But once they develop symptom, the mortality probably includes 5-year mortality is quite significant. So this is how we must think of the development of heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. So what about the clinical manifestation and assessment? Very quickly. I'm not going to detail in this thing because I summarize this thing. Say, for example, symptom, as I told earlier, they may have exertional dyspnea, fatigue in the most of the cases. Comorbid condition I have already said. Most common comorbidity 80% in hypertension, obesity is around 50%, metabolic syndrome, diabetes around 30 to 40%. Another important comorbidity is coronary artery disease, 50 to 60%. Look at here, all the comorbidities are very important, and most of them can be controlled. Most of their progress can be slowed down. So here is the position where the doctors can do many things. In examination, we know that the heart failure symptom, we can have jugular vein distension, edema, etc. Chest radiography does not markedly show anything, but in a symptomatic cases may have some lung finding like pulmonary edema. Plasma MP level in many cases is often normal, but there may be some slightly upper value. The upper value has been described. And echocardiography, I will discuss it later. There are certain echocardiography parameters. Most of them are parameters for diastolic dysfunction. And in some cases, we may need invasive hemodynamics, where we can assess the pulmonary arterial wedge pressure, either in rest and exercise. During exercise, most of the pressure can rise, I have shown earlier. And you can see the difference between the heart failure with ejection fraction and with the reduced ejection fraction. This is very simple, as you already discussed here. Important thing is in reduced is a male is more, and the preserved ejection and female is more predominant, mostly in the older patient. LV size is almost normal cavity size in compared to dilated drainage in reduced ejection fraction. And a systolic function is obviously in reduced depressed, here is mildly depressed or normal. And a diastolic dysfunction is both the cases it may be impaired. And pulmonary hypertension is common in both the sides. And BNP levels is normal sometimes, here lower or normal. And exercise capacity is severely impaired in both the cases. So important aspect of the therapy here, I'll discuss later, that there is a modest BP effect on vasodilators, but there are marked BP reduction in vasodilators. So no evidence of medical treatment. So next, how to assess? We must assess the patient regarding its cardiovascular structure and function. So for simplicity, I have divided into three parts. One is cardiovascular structure. Of the cardiovascular structure, we must identify what is the LV volume. LV volume in most of the cases of ejection function chamber diagnosis is normal. And this can be assessed by imaging technology, echocardiography, CMR or CSR. Up to 5% of the patient have mild or increased LV volume. LV volume, the upper limit of normal is 75 milliliter meter square. A LV volume less than 75% is one of the guideline-based diagnostic criteria for heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. So apart from the volume, we can assess the LV mass. LV mass is increased, and the criteria is about 30 to 50% of the patient will have increased mass. When it's present, LV is associated with significant ward prognosis. If the left ventricular hypertrophy increases or mild to severe, the prognosis is poor. The third part of the structure is the geometry. The geometry is very important. We know that this is done by the relative wall thickness. Either it is a concentric hypertrophy or it is an eccentric hypertrophy. Concentric remodeling can occur even in the absence of frank left ventricular hypertrophy in approximately 20 to 30% cases, a patient's heart failure, and associated with 25 to 35% higher risk of heart failure patient. So the translation is, if the patient has got heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, and at the same time they have got also left ventricular hypertrophy, their prognosis is poor and their mortality rate is pretty high. The second aspect is the function, cardiovascular function. The first is diastolic function, and the diastolic function is very important here because these include delayed and slow relaxation, decreased recoil, slow and decreased distensibility. So all these parameters are related to the diastolic function of the left ventricle. An important aspect is comprehensive echo assessment is very useful in these particular cases of assessment. And diastolic function can be graded as per grade 0 to grade 3 as per the echocardiography guidelines. And the 2B is the systolic function. I told earlier that apparently, though ejection fraction is normal by two-dimensional other maturity, there are certain subtle systolic dysfunction on this particular patients. So these particular patients, they may have got certain global LV systolic dysfunction to some extent. I'll show you later. So this is number one. Then what are the echocardiography assessment? As I showed earlier, that systolic and diastolic structure and function assessment mainly depend on the echocardiographic assessment. So objective demonstration of underlying cardiac structural and functional abnormalities of the heart are necessary to establish the diagnosis of heart failure of preserved ejection fraction. And this can be done by comprehensive echocardiography with Doppler TDI, and spectral is available. So we can have a comprehensive one. For example, this is the picture. You can see all the aspects of the development. From the lower left, you can see the tricuspid annular systolic function. You can see the tissue Doppler. You can see the pulmonary pressure by TRZ. On the right side, we can have got a tissue Doppler for mitral flow, or left atrial strain can also be arranged, and we can have got some sort of longitudinal strain. Even we can assess also the radial strain and also circumferential strain. So by this comprehensive assessment, echocardiography assessment, we can categorize the cardiac function of the heart in this particular patient. This is an example of a heart failure patient with preserved ejection fraction. He has got normal ejection fraction, no symptom at the moment, but when the GLS is performed, you can see the reduction of GLS level in this particular patient. So this is a simple diagram just to make you understand. There are three aspects. On the left side, red is left ventricular dysfunction. You can measure it by E prime. and that can also be always strain imaging by ejection or the ventricular ejection. And on the right side, left ventricular early recoil can also be measured by or categorized by E prime and also by left ventricular untwisting. But the important aspect in the middle is left ventricular stiffness. We can go for DT, but transit time, and all these can categorize or can assess qualitatively and quantitatively left ventricular filling pressure. And the parameter in the lower down, if possible, all the parameter of the lower down can be assessed by a comprehensive echocardiographic examination, which can categorize this particular patient's prognosis and possibly in future mode of therapy. And this is a very simple, everybody, this is how the diastolic pressure can be graded here. One important aspect I want to mention that the mitral flow and the mitral flow after peak Valsalva. You can see over here the diagnostic criteria. Once you started the grade of 1, then grade 1, 2, 3. These 2, 1, 2, 3 can go from either side to and fro. The grade 3 may improve on the right side, and then their interpretation will be different. So the main idea is try to assess as many parameters as possible. And for mitral inflow, we must perform the peak Valsalva effect on the person. To make it very simple, to integrate eco-evaluation, if now the top box, if the left ventricular left atrial volume index is less than 35, E prime less than 8, E lateral 10, so possibly there is no diastolic dysfunction. So this is a very simple aspect. But if the left atrial volume index is more than 34, E septal is less than 8, lateral less than 8, possibly they have got diastolic dysfunction. Very simple to understand, not to go in detail like the previous one. Once you see the diastolic dysfunction, then go for the categorization grade 1, 2, 3, and there are simple numbers of this particular. So if you can see over here, there are only 4 or 5 parameters. If you know that, and if you know their value, then possibly you can diagnose whether the patient has got a diastolic dysfunction or not, or if they have got diastolic dysfunction, what are the categories they belong. So now left on the end, possibly the diagnosis and management. So heart failure, there is no. This is a challenging syndrome. So there is no simple imaging test or any biomarker test we can conclusively diagnose this particular test. But in many cases, there is a stepwise approach utilizing careful physical history, examination, peptides, and others. If you go stepwise, possibly we can categorize or diagnose this particular patient. So now there are 2 important definitions. The current definition from 2013 ACC/AHA guideline on the right side, you see the both are common, signs and symptoms of heart failure, and the ejection fraction more than 50. And they do not mention about the BNP level, but they also mention abnormal LV diastolic dysfunction. The more elaborate definition was 2016 ESC. The first 2 criteria are the same. They added natriuretic peptide and they gave their value, cutoff values. And the imaging value they have also given, like relevant structural heart disease is there. Either there is LVH or left atrial enlargement. And there are some measures of left ventricular diastolic dysfunction, which I have already discussed earlier. So the very new guideline, very recently in the 2009, they call it Heart Failure Association PFF algorithm. Here, almost similar, but a bit elaborate, is if anybody has got a proper interest, or if anybody want to have some sort of research activities in this space, possibly for this algorithm is important. But for general cardiologists like me, it's not that much important at the moment for treating general patients. So the first is what is called, it's an initial workup, and what we call it pre-test assessment. So here we can see some of the symptoms, some echo, some ECG findings, the general finding. And the second stage we call diagnostic workup, and the main important thing here is 2 important things is echocardiography and natriuretic peptide. So with these 2 particular modalities, they make a score. I will discuss it a bit later. So for that reason, we must have a comprehensive echo examination, and we have got a very careful natriuretic peptide evaluation. The next two, basically F1 and F2, there are two F. The first F1 is advanced workup. We call it functional testing in case of uncertainty. If these two steps cannot give any certain diagnosis, then we can go for the third step here. In here, we can have some sort of diastolic stress testing like exercise echocardiography, and if needed for invasive measurements. And if you want to know that pinpoint the etiology, then you can go for etiological workup that is called final etiology. So this is two-phase, functional and final. So in here also a CMR, scintigraphy, and all other things. So from starting from very simple to very advanced can be given. So as shown earlier, that with two aspects of that algorithm, echo and natriuretic peptide, we have got some morphological and functional and biomarker classification, and they made some sort of scoring system. They call it echo natriuretic peptide score. So you see on the left-hand side, major and minor, and the other side is a functional, morphological, biomarker in sinus rhythm, biomarker level in atrial rhythm. So you can see like that, and there are certain marker values are there when you consider major, when you consider minor. I am not going to detail. The reference has given in the bottom. You can study it. So with this particular point, they give some point system in the lower part of the slide. You see their major criteria. If they have 2 points for it, and if you agree total these major criteria, and for minor criteria for 1. So if you add major and minor criteria points, if it is more than 5 or more, then it is definite diagnosis of heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. And if it is 2 to 4, maybe some other test is needed to diagnose. So now, a very simple way how to diagnose the patient and to treat the patient. A simple way is to there are 6 steps of treatment. First is ask the question, are there symptoms of heart failure or not? And what is the LV ejection fraction, this next part? And what is the age of the patient and possibly risk factors is there or not? And what is the BNP, NT-proBNP level for diagnosis? And what the detailed review of the comprehensive echo? So you can see over here, of these stages, most of the cases can be categorized. And the last stage is, are confirmatory tests is needed? If you want, then we can go for right heart catheterization or cardiopulmonary exercise testing. So with this, I'm not going to detail. This particular figure is from the Brownwall, I think you can get. So on the first A, B, C, you see the similar, what I was said, there is some clinical evidences of heart failure, supportive lab, then ejection fraction mostly by echo, and antecedent or comorbid disease is there or not, you have to exclude it. So this 4 picture are the basic assessment of the diagnostic workup for the patient. And the next is the morphological and major criteria I have already shown in the earlier chapter. And then if needed, then you can go for rest and exercise test. So these are the stage you follow. So if you follow this particular algorithm, possibly you will understand everything of the heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. Then come to therapy. Actually, there is no disease modifying agents available till now for this, and no specific therapy has yet proven to reduce mortality and morbidity. So therefore, treatment guidelines focused on diuretic therapy for congestion, treatment for hypertension, diagnosis and treatment for ischemia, rate control for atrial fibrillation, and of course, treatment for all other comorbidities. So these are the RCTs till now, but not given very significant effect of the treatment. You can see very few. You see in the middle channel that in heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, most of the treatment facilities, either medication or a device, does not given that much of importance as is given in heart failure fraction. And the right side, you can see the study which has been there. So the management aspect is basically 3 aspects I want to say. The one is the reduction and prevention of pulmonary and peripheral venous congestion by fluid and sodium reduction. Judicious use of diuretics and nitrates should be given for proper symptom relief. and appropriate remote monitoring based tailored care should be there. This is very important because this patient does not come to you before they have got severe symptoms. So a sort of remote monitoring or outpatient monitoring is very important. The next aspect is the aggressive treatment of antecedent and comorbid condition. So control BP at rest and modify the doses, control the glucose, treat and prevent the ischemia. This is very important. Maintain the adequate renal function and treat obesity of either by medical or, if possible, surgical weight loss management system. And the last is optimize the cardiac functional status. The patient must have what their clinical status stable. For that, we must prevent excessive tachycardia or bradycardia. Their metabolic needs should be given by the heart rate, and they are to maintain and restore the normal sinus rhythm if possible, and they control ventricular storm. In case of atrial arrhythmia, the ventricular rate should be under control. So this is another one. I'm going to detail. So you can classify your patient according to what is the symptom on the upper side. For example, lung congestion, pulmonary hypertension, skeletal muscle activity fibrillation, and you can classify another group on the left hand side by the overweight comorbidity. And for that reason, there are different drugs which may have got certain effect. So that has been given in a recent publication that you can try that use. Possibly say at the last, actually, I want to show you the importance of coronary artery disease, because these are the elderly people with a lot of coronary risk factors. This patient has got coronary artery disease. So this is a study where compared to heart failure with preserved ejection fraction patient with no coronary artery disease and with coronary arteries, they display the increased mortality. You see here on the right side, and the red is heart failure without coronary disease and heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. So those who have got heart failure and those do not have, you see the difference. And another one, if we detect a patient significant coronary disease, we must revascularize it. You can see the effect of revascularization here. If you revascularize with coronary disease, their prognosis is better than those who do not have. So in the point where coronary artery disease is significant one, they must be evaluated if there is a significant symptom for the possibility of revascularization. And if revascularization is indicated, they must be revascularized. So this is at the end of my presentation here. What are the current treatment? But very key points. So first is symptomatic treatment with diuretics, treatment of hypertension, maybe diuretics inhibitor MRAs, treatment of ischemia should be there and symptoms should be relieved. Anticoagulant for patient, the atrial fibrillation, rate control of the atrial fibrillation. We do not know what is the optimal rate for this. And spironolactone for reduction of heart failure, rehospitalization, possibly more effective in preserved ejection patient with lower ejection fraction. So if we remember at least the last one, then we can possibly have this. So with this presentation, with this simple discussion, I like to stop my presentation here and waiting for the discussion. Thank you very much for all the residents, all the fellows in training, and all the DCARD students are in the course. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
You, as usual, brilliant, sir. Brilliant presentation. Elaborate and palatable presentation, sir. Sir, you had the great accommodation and clinical cardiologist to carry over. But, sir, I always said my fellows, you should like young, energetic, and smart like Professor Nodul, sir. You're always young and smart presentation, always, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
I'd like a comment on Professor Nodul, sir. Professor,
স্ক্রিন শেয়ারটা বন্ধ করেন স্যার। স্যার স্ক্রিন শেয়ারটা বন্ধ করে দেন।
স্ক্রিন শেয়ারটা না?
হ্যাঁ, তাহলে আপনাকে দেখতে পাবো আমরা।
স্ক্রিন শেয়ারটা যে কোথায় গেল খুঁজে পাচ্ছি না। আচ্ছা, উপরে বলেন।
স্টপ শেয়ার।
ও স্টপ শেয়ার না? আচ্ছা, ঠিক আছে, পাওয়া গেছে। হ্যাঁ,
ওকে, থ্যাংক ইউ স্যার।
থ্যাংক ইউ
স্যার। What is sir?
As I was telling
about the elaborate presentation. So elaborate.
As I was telling, the heart failure with preserved ejection fraction is actually as an enigma. particularly from the point of view of treatment. Which drug, how much, should we use it, should we not? For example, Sir was saying in atrial fibrillation, the rate control we do not know, because previously we thought the rate should be around 70 to 80, but recent studies have shown the rate could be as high as 110, between 90 to 110, and that will not have any effect on the mortality. So even in atrial fibrillation, we are not sure whether the rate controlling the rate, keeping it around 70 to 80 is beneficial or not. There are many questions than answers regarding the treatment aspect. I think Afzal sir has joined. Khalid Mohsin Bhai is there, many other persons there. We'll be asking questions and we'll be taking questions from the students. And we hope to learn much more from sir again.
Sir, Khalid Mohsin sir, do you hear me?
Yes.
Khalid Mohsin sir.
Yes, Mohsin. I am very much grateful to my teacher and mentor, Nazrul sir. As usual, he is really an expert in this field. Actually, I have just comment. I don't have any questions. Actually, the diagnosing the disease of heart failure with preserved ejection fraction is it's a big problem. It is for the two aspects, because the patient present us with the non-specific symptoms like fatigue. But one thing I personally feel that if we inquire carefully, many of them has a history of paroxysmal nocturnal dyspnea. This is a symptom which we must inquire the patient very meticulously. This might give us a clue. And another thing, the echocardiographic examination is the main tool for diagnosing. But unfortunately, the echocardiographers of our country, they are so much pressed for time that they cannot give enough time to meticulously evaluate, because it is a very difficult echo diagnosis. In Western world, the echo are done by the echo technologies. They are given half an hour, you record everything, then you present to the cardiologist. But in our country, the doctors have to do the echo with a very hard pressed of time, and they cannot see all those parameters which are necessary for diagnosis. So many of the LV, many of the heart failure with preserved ejection, I think the diagnosis is missed. And regarding treatment, I had a previous diagnosis that with keeping the heart rate as low as possible is probably good, because the diastole, if we prolong the diastole, there might be the improved compliance of the left ventricle. But nowadays, as Wadud has said, that this notion has been changed. So we must emphasize for a thorough history taking and a very good meticulous echo examination for diagnosing this group of patients. Treatment is, as Sir has said, there is no specific treatment apart from the endothelin antagonist, mineralocorticoid receptor antagonist. These are the two drugs, but we must be very careful to exclude the diagnosis. Thank you, sir.
Sir, can I ask you a question, sir? If I want to do a very hurried echo, and which 2 or 3 parameters that can give me a clue the patient probably has diastolic dysfunction?
Basically, not only the diastolic dysfunction, if you see only very few parameters important is, I will come to later. But before that, our echocardiographer, most of the time, we do not know about the patient. So clinical information very important. What the clinician actually wants to know, if they know that the patient may have diastolic dysfunction, that's heart failure, so they can go accordingly. Now coming to your point, actually basic diagnosis is for structure. You can have left ventricular hypertrophy by 2D echocardiography, and later you can go for Doppler echocardiography, the flow rate, so mitral flow and tissue Doppler. If you do only these two, then possibly you can categorize 90% of the patient. But if we add with this a pulmonary flow, possibly you can add another 5%. So and the last 5% you cannot do that. So my suggestion is, for doing echocardiography, you do 2D echocardiography, systolic function, and structure, say heart failure or the eccentric level of hypertrophy. So this is very simple. Even you can do by two-dimensional echocardiography. And for Doppler and tissue is very important now, very simple nowadays. Just it is a time for a button to click. So you can give either tissue Doppler imaging, mostly lateral and medial, and mitral flow. And if you have enough time, then you can go for pulmonary vein. If you do these three things, possibly, and if you practice it for a month or two, the total time for this examination should not take more than 5 to 10 minutes.
Can I add something? Sometimes the people they raise pulmonary pressure with a preservation fraction. I think that's a pointer that patient actually have diastolic dysfunction.
Yes.
Then we should pay a little bit more attention to those diastolic parameters.
Yes.
Isn't it, sir?
This is important. Then another two thing is important. This LA measurement can be easily done by 2D. So you can go have an LA measurement and LA volume. Yes.
Volume index is very sensitive.
Always for heart failure patient, we can make a routine. One is two-dimensional for structural function, tissue Doppler, and the mitral flow and pulmonary flow. And another two important is LA measurement and IVC collapsibility. So these 4 or 5 things is very simple. Just A, B, C, D. You can make. This is very simple.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Dr. Rehan, sir, Professor Jalal sir with us. Professor Senior Teacher Professor Jalaluddin sir with us. Professor Jalaluddin sir. Please unmute, sir. Sir, Jalal sir. Sir, assalamu alaikum, sir.
Sir, শুনতে পাই?
হ্যাঁ পাচ্ছি স্যার। স্যার একটু আনমিউট করেন স্যার। স্যার জালাল স্যার একটু আনমিউট করেন।
You have to give some time to sir to get adapted with this technology.
হ্যাঁ স্যারের সাথে স্যারের ছেলে আছে বোধহয় বা স্যার একটু আনমিউট করেন স্যার। স্যার একটু আনমিউট করেন স্যার। প্রফেসর জালাল স্যার, কবির ভাই কিছু বলবেন? কবির ভাই শোনা যাচ্ছে না। আপনার শোনা যাচ্ছে না সাউন্ড।
ভালো করে বলো একটু। হ্যাঁ বলুন। হ্যাঁ কবির বোঝা যাচ্ছে, তোমাকে চেহারা দেখা যাচ্ছে, কথা বোঝা যাচ্ছে। হ্যাঁ বলো একটু।
আমার মনে হচ্ছিল যে স্যার আমি 20 বছর আগে যখন ছাত্র ছিলাম তখন ওই সময় চলে গেছিলাম। আপনাকে দেখে অনেক ভালো লাগলো স্যার।
সুস্থ আছি। হ্যাঁ ভালো। পুরো কথা শোনা যাচ্ছে না। তুমি ভালো আছো তো? মহসিন ভালো কিন্তু শুনতে পাচ্ছি না যে কবিরের কথা। কবিরের মনটা
ডক্টর অজয়, do you need any question to sir? Dr. Ajay unmute.
Okay, শোনা যাচ্ছে?
হ্যাঁ শোনা যাচ্ছে, অজয় শোনা যাচ্ছে।
I have a question to Professor Nuzul Islam sir. I must congratulate him for his brilliant presentation. Sir, I have question. What is the prevalence of pulmonary hypertension and RV dysfunction in HFpEF patient, and how will you manage them?
Basically, the clear-cut prevalence of pulmonary hypertension and it is around 5 in pulmonary patients. Those who are advanced, middle, moderate to severe heart failure, they have got around 30 to 35% pulmonary hypertension patients, and most of them also have got their right ventricular dysfunction and right atrial dysfunction. So in some cases, in advanced studies, they also perform the right ventricular strain for that from very early beginning. Because once the left ventricular diastolic dysfunction prevails, it goes to fail the upstream right ventricular system. So once you develop the left ventricular dysfunction, those centers, they follow the patient, they always go for the right ventricular function. they measure or assess right ventricular function by 2D examination, Doppler examination, and also strain imaging. So they do also both for strain for RV imaging. So the average incidence is around say 25 to 35 pulmonary patient in moderate to severe group. As the patient goes more severe, the pulmonary hypertension goes higher. Once they go to end stage, possibly pulmonary pain also goes down as the RV fail more severely. Basically, isolated treatment for this particular hypertension is not there. So you have seen in the chart that many of the patients are giving PDE inhibitor for this particular group, and obviously the results is not that much with other findings, but this is one of the experimental drug. Most of the patient of the clinician though. ঠিক আছে
Sir, thank you.
Khondor Kambul, sir.
Sir, can I add something?
Yes, of course.
Salam, sir.
Kamrul.
Thanks for wonderful and excellent lecture. স্যারের তো সবসময় হার্ট ফেলিওরের উপর একটা অ্যাফিনিটি আছে অনেক দিন থেকেই, এই জন্য আজকে মানে প্রথম থেকে রেডি ছিলাম যে স্যার লেকচারটা মিস করা যাবে না। তো ইট ইজ ভেরি ইজি টু হ্যান্ডেল heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, but it is very difficult to manage and diagnose heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. So, sir, wonderful lecture এর জন্য অনেক কিছু আমরা মানে অনেক জিনিস আমরা ক্লিয়ার করতে পারলাম। One question, sir, what is the role of ARNI in heart failure with preserved ejection fraction? Role of ARNI in heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, sir. Thank you, sir.
In fact, this has got a separate study with ARNI preserved ejection fraction. So this is the result is not tremendously encouraging, but since main drug ACE inhibitors and RAS inhibitors as a whole, they have got certain beneficial role in the particular this patient. So in that way, ARNI can give some of the improvement, symptomatic improvement for this particular patient. So,
study চলতেছে বোধহয়
Yeah, the study চলছে. Yes. One is, yeah.
So
can I add something? One thing is that we often actually equate LV diastolic dysfunction with heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, but sir has shown that both are not actually synonymous. And in there, if we become more give more importance to the heart failure with LV diastolic dysfunction, the causative factors, maybe we can prevent the occurrence of heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. After its occurrence, there's very little actually we can change the course of the disease. There's no drug that can actually change the mortality ratio.
I add, Wadud, I'll just add two things. One is the heart failure continuum is very, very tricky condition to treat. So that is why we start staging so that we can start treatment from the beginning of the. So that staging has now been reconverted for the heart failure with preserved ejection. I have showed it later. So after the risk factor, the main important initial marker you can say rather, marker is diastolic dysfunction. This is remote, no symptom. So that is why very important. Well, every patient, say female, obese, diabetic, hypertensive, and older than 60, we must routinely perform to echocardiographic examination, what are the diastolic dysfunction. So if you have diastolic dysfunction, just locate him or mark him that this patient is going to have heart failure. Maybe it will start with preserved ejection fraction if there is no structural damage. But if this patient develops structural damage, say for example coronary disease, their heart failure with reduced ejection will be more worse. So with early diagnosis of left ventricular dysfunction, we can surrogate patients. We can surrogate patient or separate patient of the high risk. And if the patient at the same time also have got coronary disease, his risk is more than 10 times because he has got artery disease and go. for that. So that is why the important thing is that diagnosis of left ventricular diagnosis can dictate the patient may develop heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, but may not also develop it.
Yeah.
So this is very important. What we have said that should be remembered for every physician to patient with which patient have dyspnea either in rest or with exercise, or the PND somebody has told that PND may have Khaled was telling many patient has got PND. So not only PND, many patient with sleep apnea, they are also having dysfunction. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, about
question from
PND, one thing is that the patients with COPD or patients with heart failure both have exertional shortness of breath.
Yeah.
But PND is very specific for heart failure. PND
Right.
do not occur in COPD patient or respiratory patient.
Sir, one question with the student, Dr. Rehan. Dr. Rehan, would you ask your question? Dr. Rehan?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You ask
Sir.
the question, please.
Sir, can we say alternatively diastolic heart failure or heart failure with preserved ejection fraction? My first question. And second question is that there is any intervention other than revascularization in heart failure with preserved ejection fraction?
Thank you. Sir,
Basically, the term diastolic heart failure and systolic heart failure was previously actually coined, say around 40, 50 years ago. And this diastolic heart failure actually does not always mean that the patient has got the LV dysfunction or ejection fraction is lower. So initially, when there was another term, forward flow and backward flow. And so systolic heart failure and diastolic heart failure is very near to heart failure with preserved ejection fraction and reduced ejection fraction, but not the same. So that is why the terminology has been changed. There are two terminology. One is staging, another is according to the ejection fraction. And to describe patient's clinical situation, you can use some term. So this is number one. Regarding intervention, actually the patient who has got an associated comorbidity, say cardiomyopathy, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, or ventricular dysfunction or other, in that case, the patient may be assessed whether other device management can be there. Number two, if the patient is complicated with some sort of arrhythmias, the arrhythmias may be controlled with the antiarrhythmic drugs or anti-arrhythmic devices. And the patient should be assessed for coronary disease, I have shown. If the patient develops coronary disease and symptom is coronary or the risk factor is pretty high, then we must assess his coronary circulation. And if this coronary circulatory system has got a significant disease, we can go for revascularization, either surgery or other thing. So there is no definitive therapy for that. Once if the patient progress from preserved ejection fraction to reduced ejection fraction to end-stage heart failure, possibly the end-stage heart failure device management will then be applied to this group of patients also.
thank you. Atar sir, Atar Ali sir, do you hear me? Atar Ali sir? Atar Ali sir?
He's the right person to answer.
Sir, Atar Ali sir, do you hear me?
Mostly sir is not here now.
Actually, sir has already mentioned the patients with preserved ejection fraction, 50% of them have sudden cardiac death. So arrhythmia prevention is actually very important, play important role in reducing the mortality in both types of heart failure patients.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Sarar Mubarak Chaudhary, do you have any question? Dr. Sarar, please unmute you.
Sir,
ask your question.
Son name. This is my son name. I am Dr. Nilufar Fatima, sir.
Dr. Nilufar, I think so. Okay.
This is my son.
Yeah. Okay, I know.
Yes, sir.
I know.
Is my son.
I know. Yeah.
Hello, sir. Sir, this is a very nice and very easy presentation for understand the preserved ejection fraction, heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. I have one question that is regarding the different entity of the preserved ejection fraction. Is there any is there the same criteria of echo diagnosis for everyone, or they have different criteria for different entity of preserved ejection fraction, heart failure with preserved ejection fraction diagnosis? This is my question to Professor Nazrul Islam.
Basically, the parameters I have mentioned is for the general use, but for different subset of patients. For example, if the patient has got, even the patient has got sarcoid, then sarcoid patient also may have such a ejection fraction. So they have got their own criteria for that. And for aged people, diabetic patients, and different ages. So for this, I refer you to the guideline for the assessment of left ventricular diastolic dysfunction in general, and very recent guidelines about how to diagnose heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, very recently published in 2019 by the ASC. So in those cases, I did them categorize. Since this is very general presentation, general lecture, so I made it very simple to understand, not to understand how to retain the minimum thing, how to retain for practical use. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir, may I ask a question, sir?
Yeah, Arif.
Sir,
Any
thank you, sir. I am Dr. Arif. So thank you, sir, for your excellent presentation, sir. It will be of great help for us. I have a question. How frequently you encountered the primary heart failure with preserved ejection fraction? Mostly we get the secondary causes, but how frequently you encounter the primary cases which are heart failure with preserved ejection fraction? And is there any difference between the prognosis of these two groups?
Basically, I have shown you that if your mind, if you do not know it, you cannot search it. So first thing is you must search it. But our main problem is we do not properly clinically search for the disease, or we proper clinically discuss the patient's complaint. So preliminary important thing is the thorough clinical examination, clinical history taking and examination is very important. And then you have to find that this patient may have this and this. Then you go search for it. So number one, this is from our side. From the patient side, the patient is sometimes in the earlier, they are not very symptomatic, but they are symptom only in the in case of exercise. So they do not come to the doctors or the healthcare system for early diagnosis. But the patient who's come to our clinic or our chamber with other symptoms, if you search for it, then a significant number of patients you can have these diseases. I can give my own experience. Many times I working in the private as a echocardiographer. So I examine many patients who do not have any cardiovascular complaint. Either they have got come for pre-surgery, pre-surgical checkup or things. And in many cases, we see some parametric abnormality. I call parametric abnormality means the parameters of left ventricular dysfunction present without any symptom. Or the doctors, they have never asked for that. So we can see that they have got some sort of dysfunction, meaning they have crossed the upper limit of normal of this particular parameter, which I have got already mentioned. So in that case, they have got diastolic dysfunction. They do not have the heart failure symptom, but they develop of it. There are a lot of patients we can see where they come with a frank heart failure. Even their lung is total have pulmonary edema, still then their ejection fraction is around 65, 68, 70 even. And most of in many patients with pregnancy, you can see even, though that time diagnosis is very difficult because high volume, difficult, you can see. So there are a lot of patients, those who are having heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, presenting with a frank heart failure symptom as you asked for it. So I cannot give you the exact data because I don't have a study, but I can give my own experience. It will be those who come to the emergency room or in the private chamber or the outpatient department, approximately 20 to 25% patient has got heart failure with preserved ejection fraction at the time of presentation. And sometimes at the time of presentation, you see that the patient have got heart failure, and possibly the ejection fraction is around 35. So we cannot say this is preserved ejection fraction. Once this volume load is decreased, you see the patient's ejection fraction go to 70%. So possibly this patient has got a pretty long time of having heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. And when his acuteness has come and when the volume increases too much, the patient presented as a patient with the reduced ejection fraction. So in summary, possibly we have got a lot of patients with preserved ejection fraction. And if you go retrospectively, if you diagnose the patient with heart failure, if you follow the patient at least for 5 years, you see the mortality is not improving with the same drug you give to the heart failure with ejection fraction. And there is a significant data from registry and also from the RCTs, as I've shown you. Nawajesh ke dekha Farid.
Dr. Nawazeshwari sir.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Nawazeshwari sir. Dr.
Yes.
Nawazeshwari sir.
Yes. Can you hear me? আছি হ্যাঁ
ভালো আছেন স্যার?
ভালো আছি
আচ্ছা।
Thank you.
বলেন, স্যার।
First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers and particularly Professor Nurul Islam sir for this webinar. After a long time, I have attended a presentation of Professor Nurul Islam. It is really brilliant. A decade back, the heart failure with preserved ejection fraction was a matter of minimum discussion, but nowadays it is really in consideration for treatment of heart failure cases. Beyond the clinical presentation of the patients, the investigations like echo and natriuretic factor peptide is available mostly in most places of Bangladesh, and it is real consideration to see the ejection fraction preserved in the patient of heart failure patients in our clinical practice. Again, I like to thank all, and a nice time we have passed during this COVID time this evening. Thank you. This afternoon.
Dr. Shahabuddin sir. Shahabuddin sir.
Yes, thank you very much, Mohsin, Dr. Abdul Wadud Choudhury, and my mentor and my professor, Nazrul Islam sir. Sir is always is a good teacher and always a good speaker also. I have no questions. I have learned this a lot to this presentation. There are very new things that sir have been introduced. Recently in September, October, that was published in European Society of Cardiology journal. Sir has also included this also. I'm very much happy to see it, that it is not incorporated into ESC guidelines and American College of Cardiology guidelines. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your nice presentation, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Tan, you unmute, please unmute him. Please unmute.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, sir, for your nice presentation. I have a question here. It's regarding the what is the advantage of the tissue dropper over the conventional echocardiogram considering heart failure?
Basically, a tissue Doppler, you can diagnose some sort of subtle systolic dysfunction in this particular purpose of the patient. Because many times we do not think that this patient develops systolic dysfunction. So when you compare with tissue Doppler, and if we add with the speckle tracking with GLS, then the assessment will be more better than simply 2D echo. So 2D echo principally diagnose or assess the systolic function and structural function. For the functional aspect, we rely on the Doppler flow, tissue Doppler flow, and recently for strain imaging. So if we just consider for a structural aspect and the functional aspect, the structural aspect is by 2D, and if you go in advanced for CMR, etc. And for the functional aspect, you go for Doppler, tissue Doppler, and if possible, available, go for strain imaging.
Thank you, sir.
Can I add something?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Sir.
Let's consider this, the heart failure is a failure in the proper utilization of the energy. At the tissue level, when this equilibrium with the energy and the need for work and the available energy because of some systemic defect in the tissue occurs, we can detect those abnormality very early on with tissue Doppler.
Yeah.
But with 2D and MOD, we can detect when it is at a much macro level. That's what Sir was saying. Very subtle abnormality we can detect with tissue Doppler very early on, both systolic and diastolic. And at the macro level, when it's well manifested, we can detect by only 2D and MOD.
Actually, for example, basically diastole was considered a passive phase, even in our student life and even our earlier life.
Yeah.
But definitely diastole is not a passive level. We have got active relaxation. So to understand left ventricular diastolic dysfunction, which is giving rise to left ventricular heart failure with ejection fraction, basic understanding is of the relaxation physiology or diastole. Physiology of diastole is very important. And physiology of diastole, as you know, it starts from, as Professor Avadhut says, it starts from the cellular level. You have seen, I didn't have much time, so we can elaborate the cellular pathways and the other pathways. So that is very important to study, that the cell, it starts from the cellular level, but it starts from the risk factors, goes to the cellular level first, and then to the organ level. When the disease is spread to the organ level, possibly the symptom arises, and then they come to the front of the doctors. Thank you.
Sir,
Dr. Kabir Jawan.
Can I add something?
Of course.
For example, in ischemic cascade, there is problems in the energy utilization. Then the first thing that goes wrong is the diastolic function.
That's right.
And then gradually the systolic dysfunction, then the ECG changes, then symptoms. So I tell my students, always ask for effort intolerance. If the patient was saying, I used to climb up 3 flights of stairs very easily, now I cannot do that. Even with normal ECG, normal apparent 2D echo, the patient must have diastolic dysfunction. If we do the exercise and do the tissue Doppler or anything, we can easily identify that. And that's a precursor of future heart failure with preserved ejection fraction.
Dr. Kabir Jawan is here, sir. Dr. Kabir Jawan is the sir. Please unmute him. Okay, sir.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Assalamualaikum.
For
your excellent presentation. Sir is my guide. My thesis was first myocardial infarction. He tried his level best and he collected my thesis title. I was passive regarding acquiring my title of my thesis. And sir is always excellent in speaking. His speaking is rhythmic. It's very distinct. It's an Bangla bole is ishoniyo ekta presentation. Thank you, sir, for your excellent presentation. I want to add just few moments because in our country, there are a lot of 2D echo. Many one are busy with the 2D echo. So from 2D, we can actually gauge some sort of diastolic or ejection fraction. If someone says that there is no reasonable muscle memory, there is hypertrophy, delay is dilated. That can give you some dictation or indication that this person may have some preserved ejection fraction with heart failure. So that's all. Another thing is all the systolic heart failure patients have diastolic dysfunction. But diastolic dysfunction is a totally different entity. That is all. So sir have elaborated all the things. It's an excellent presentation. I am very much impressed of speaking of my teacher. He is my mentor. Thank you, sir.
Dr. Jalal sir, Professor Jalaluddin sir, again, Professor MD Jalaluddin sir, do you hear me, sir? Sir, unmute you, sir.
জালাল স্যারকে আমি টেলিফোন করছিলাম, বুঝছো, কোন ক্রমেই স্যারকে আমি আনমিউট করাইতে পারতেছি না।
না, এটা কারণ আছে, ওই যে স্যার, আসসালামু আলাইকুম স্যার। স্যার ভালো থাকবেন স্যার।
স্যার শোনা যাচ্ছে?
আমাদের সবার শুভেচ্ছা নেবেন স্যার, ভালো থাকবেন স্যার।
শুনতে পায়, স্যার শুনতে পায়, স্যারের সাথে ওখানে ফোনে আমি কথা বলছি, স্যার এদিকে সব কথা শুনতে পায়,
আমাদের
স্যার আনমিউট করতে পারতেছেন।
আপনি আনমিউট চ্যানেল দোয়া করবেন স্যার। আচ্ছা, নেক্সট কোশ্চেন ফ্রম কে? ডক্টর হাসনাত জাফর। ডক্টর হাসনাত জাফর। ডক্টর আসিফুদ্দোজা আসিফ। ডক্টর আসিফ, do you hear me?
আমাদের অজয় মনে হয় কিছু বলতে চাচ্ছে, মহসিন।
অজয় বলো কিছু।
I have a question to Professor Nuzul sir. Is diastolic dysfunction obligatory for the diagnosis of HFpEF?
Diastolic dysfunction is one of the important components for this, and this has been given as a diagnostic criteria of it. But only diastolic dysfunction is not equivalent to heart failure. This is a part of it.
So sometimes in echocardiography, we can search for diastolic dysfunction, but we have not found diastolic dysfunction. But patient in heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. So there are some cause of non-HFpEF. So can you elaborate this?
No, the non-HFpEF is this is again a misnomer, because again misnomer. HFpEF is HFpEF. So the non-HFpEF is not not a correct terminology to be used. Left ventricular dysfunction means the normal function is response in many ways. Either dysfunction may be systolic or maybe diastolic. The diastolic dysfunction has got three components I have shown earlier. Either is stiffness, relaxation, another. So if the parameters for relaxation, I have shown in the chart, the parameters of relaxation is impaired, we call it diastolic dysfunction. Means that's a normal level of function. But for heart failure, remember, the signs and symptoms of heart failure must be there. Once it is signs of heart, only diastolic dysfunction parameter are positive, there is no heart failure signs and symptoms, it is not heart failure. So if it is not heart failure, it is not a diastolic, it is not dysfunction, dysfunction. So we see that the left ventricular diastolic dysfunction is one of the criteria, one of the parameters to diagnose, as is shown in the chapter how the diastolic dysfunction progresses to the heart failure. Initially, many patients develop dysfunction first, and then ultimately they develop heart failure. So you can say it is not very scientific, but you can say that left ventricular diastolic dysfunction may be a precursor for heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. Maybe.
Thank you, sir.
Clinical practice, sir, we have seen the patient have signs symptoms of heart failure. BNP is raised, and we search for one of the two criteria. One is LVH plus LAE, or there is diastolic dysfunction. So if we do not found any features of diastolic dysfunction, so we cannot exclude the patient is suffering from HFpEF. Because we have LVH or left atrial enlargement, we have raised BNP, we have sign symptoms of heart failure. So in that case, we can diagnose this case of HFpEF. Is it right, sir?
Actually, basically, this is a no man's land. This picture, it is neither go for reduced ejection fraction or for preserved ejection fraction. But if it had got preserved ejection fraction and other parameters are fine, you can classify as HFpEF. No problem. As you say.
Thank you, sir. Wadud sir, if you comment, sir. Wadud sir. Okay. Professor Afzal Rahman, sir.
The thing, Ajoy, I want to put in something. Sometimes you don't get the. Can I put in something?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
sometimes we do not get the parameters of diastolic dysfunction, but if we do the patient the exercise and the check it, we'll get that. Because diastolic dysfunction depends on the heart rate as well. And if we do that, we can find out whether the patient actually have that. That's why analysis, as Sir was repeatedly stressing, history taking is so important in deciding whether patient may have diastolic dysfunction or not.
In the stage of diagnosis, I have shown you that the last stage, the fourth stage, I have shown that there are certain cases can be diagnosed. In that case, you can do two things. One is right heart catheterization for real finding of the pressure and cardiopulmonary testing. So I have shown two slides also, the before exercise and after exercise, how the left atrial pressure goes high. Thank you.
Yes. That Sir was repeatedly stressing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir. Professor Afzal, sir, do you hear me?
Yes.
Do you hear me? I want two comments from you, sir. Number one, so nice, elaborate, I think laborious presentation. I think, sir, presentation for 7 days for so elaborate presentation. Few comments for the presentation. Number one, issue your presentation. Jeta bollen amader Kobir Jaman sir. Number two, sir, you are the great organizer I ever seen in Bangladesh. We mourn, you know, our 38 fellow seniors, colleagues, and junior has lost during this pandemic era. Regarding this issue, our NICVT is a hot spot now. What is your recommendation to saving the front fighters, sir? Thank you, sir. Two comments from sir.
Thank you very much. Actually, regarding the presentation of Professor Nazrul Islam, sir, nothing to comment on. Everybody, যেটা বলেছে তার চেয়ে বেশি কিছু আমার বলার নাই. It is outstanding presentation. আমার শুধু outstanding. I will say that it is outstanding presentation. I will say very simple word, outstanding presentation. Number two is that I have one thing, how diastolic dysfunction causes the sudden cardiac death. Because systolic dysfunction causes cardiac death, we know it, they are arrhythmogenic, and that can be prevented by pacemaker implantation, DC, defluidic implantation. But sudden cardiac death, how diastolic dysfunction can cause a sudden cardiac death, how it could be prevented? This is one question. Sir. And last comment, আমি যাব স্যারের বলার পরে। How diastolic dysfunction can
actually basically heart failure with preserved ejection fraction has got many factors to develop arrhythmogenic. One is the left ventricular hypertrophy. As you know, the hypertrophic heart is more arrhythmogenic than the normal heart or even infarcted heart to some extent. Number one. Number two, we do not know the real pathophysiology. So we have got plenty of heterogeneity or phenotypic system. So it starts from simple hypertrophy, from hypertension to amyloid, to pericardial disease, to myocardial disease and other disease. So there are a lot of other things. That's why you see these myocardium become more arrhythmogenic many times. Number one. Number two, since we do not know the exact pharmacological function over this particular group of patients, sometimes we use theoretically or empirically many of the things. And many of the drugs can also develop arrhythmogenic. So you see that if you see the two type of data, one from RCTs, different RCTs, and another one different registries, there are two different data. One group of data says that cardiovascular death is more in HFpEF than another data shows the cardiovascular is less in heart patient. But arrhythmia as a whole, the basic pathophysiology should be understood. First, the detection of arrhythmia and the type of arrhythmia. Which type of arrhythmia needs which type of investigations we must think. So basically, diagnosis fast and then go for the its etiology of arrhythmia. And according to the etiology of arrhythmia, that can be treated either pharmacologically or, if needed, by electrophysiologically. This is important. Number one. Number two is most of the cardiovascular death in HFpEF is also arrhythmogenic, and they develop ultimately go to cardiac death. Heart failure death is more in systolic heart failure, with a reduced ejection fraction, but a bit less in heart failure with preserved ejection fraction.
Thank you, sir.
May I something,
What
sir?
is, sir?
Arrhythmia analysis shows the patient with less ejection fraction, less than 30%, they have more death due to progression of the heart failure itself. But
Yes.
those in the around 35 to 45 or around those, they have more death related to arrhythmia. It seems that the presence of both dead tissue or diseased tissue and presence of viable tissue which are jeopardized, this juxtaposition probably led to more arrhythmogenicity in this group.
Yes. Abja.
Abdul, sir?
Tarman, do you think that we should go for defibrillation implantation? DC
Yes.
implantation? Do you think that it is Athar is not there? No,
Yeah.
Athar is not there. Athar?
Athar sir ছিলেন কিন্তু উনি বোধহয়
Okay.
কোনো একটা
Now, okay, thank you. So we will go for the next তোমার যেটা query যে actually this is very actually
Sir,
এখন
but the studies have not shown any benefit of implantation in those with
okay, now thank you.
So much
মহসিন শোনা যায়?
হ্যাঁ শোনা যায় স্যার, বলেন স্যার।
মহসিন?
জি
আচ্ছা,
শোনা যাচ্ছে।
এখন হলো কি ইনফেকশন কন্ট্রোলের দিকে সমস্যা দাঁড়াচ্ছে যে একটা হলো সেন্ট্রালি তো গভর্নমেন্ট ট্রাই করছে, চেষ্টা করছে, এবং গভর্নমেন্ট কিন্তু এখন দেখা যাচ্ছে যে মানে পুরো কান্ট্রিকে লকডাউন না করে সেটা রেড জোন গ্রিন জোনে ভাগ করছে বিভিন্ন জোন অনুসারে। সেরকমই প্রত্যেকটা হসপিটালের অ্যাডমিনিস্ট্রেশনকে কিন্তু বুঝতে হবে যে তার হসপিটালের কি ক্যাপাসিটি, তার হসপিটালের ইনফেকশন রেটটা কেমন, এটা সেন্ট্রালি করসপন্ড করে কিন্তু এটা করতে হবে। না করলে কিন্তু প্রবলেম হলো কি আমরা নিজেরাই সবকিছু করতে চাই। এখন উই হ্যাভ টু হেল্প দ্য ইনফেকশাস পিপল, উই হ্যাভ টু টেক ওপিনিয়ন ফ্রম দ্য হলো কি আইসিইউ এক্সপার্ট, উই হ্যাভ টু মেডিসিন এক্সপার্ট। এখন আমরা কার্ডিওলজিস্ট হয়ে আমরাই সবকিছু করতে চাচ্ছি, এটা কিন্তু ঠিক না। আমার মনে হয় যে হসপিটালের যে কাজ তারা নিজেরা বসে অন্য এক্সপার্টদের সাথে অ্যাডমিনিস্ট্রেশনের সাথে বসা, এনআইসিবিডিতে অ্যাডমিনিস্ট্রেশনের বসা উচিত এখন, কারণ এনআইসিবিডিতে 133 শুনলাম এবং মেনি অফ দ্য সাইলেন্ট কেস মেবি। সুতরাং এটা কিন্তু প্যানিক একটা সৃষ্টি হয়েছে ডক্টরদের জন্য। যখন আমার সাথে যারা কাজ করতো তারা আমাকে টেলিফোন করে, স্যার যাচ্ছি, আমার জন্য দোয়া করেন, আমার হয়তো বাসায় কোভিড নিয়ে ফিরবো। কাজে এই ধরনের প্যানিক জায়গা থেকে কিন্তু আমাদেরকে বের আসতে হবে এবং সবাইকে কনফিডেন্ট গেইন করতে হবে। আমার মনে হয় ইউ হ্যাভ টু বি ডিসকাসড উইথ দ্য বাই ইয়োর সেলফ, with the authority and also the infectious control peoples. কারণ এখানে মনে হয় যে প্রবলেমটা হলো কি যে আমরা কিন্তু জানি না যে কোভিড ইনফেকশন কিভাবে কন্ট্রোল করতে হয়। বিশেষ করে আমি পার্সোনালি জানি না, বা আমাদের যে পিপিএ গুলো পড়া হচ্ছে, আজকে সকালে আমি একটু পিপিএ পড়ে বাইরে গেছি, দেখে ঘামতে ঘামতে অস্থির হয়ে যাচ্ছি। কারণ পিপিএ পড়ে আমাদের যে ওয়েদারে তো আসল কথা কি বেশিক্ষণ থাকা তো ভেরি ডিফিকাল্ট। আর এই যে আমরা তো পিপিএ পড়ছি, তখন নাক যখন ঘামতেছে, আমার যখন মুখ দিয়ে ঘামতেছে, সেটা কতটুকু প্রোটেকশন দিচ্ছে সেটাও কিন্তু একটা ভাববার বিষয়। আমার কাছে যেটা মনে হয়েছে, আমার নিজের কাছে ভয় হচ্ছিল, ওয়েটি হয়ে গেছে পুরো, আমার হলে কি মাস্ক এবং সবকিছু ওয়েটি হয়ে গেছে। সুতরাং দিস আর থিংস উই হ্যাভ টু ডিসকাস আমার মনে হয়। তার এখন গভর্নমেন্ট যেহেতু বেশি রেড হইলে তো ব্লক বন্ধ করে দিচ্ছে, আমার মনে হয়
স্যার আমি একটু কমেন্ট করতে চাই স্যার। আমার মনে হয় যে এই যে 8 ঘন্টা 12 ঘন্টা 24 ঘন্টা ডিউটি করছে, এটা না করে স্যার 4 আওয়ার্স 4 ঘন্টা ডিউটি করা যায়। যে সিস্টার নার্স একটানা 7 দিন ডিউটি করছে, 7 ডেজ কোভিড হাসপাতালে, এটা কত সাইন্টিফিক। এটা না করে যদি আমরা 4 ঘন্টা করতে পারি, পিপি পরে মাস্ক পরে, এবং পিপি পরে কিন্তু স্যার বাথরুমে যাওয়া যাবে না, নামাজ পড়া যাবে না, ওই সময় ওইটা পরেই থাকতে হবে স্যার। সেক্ষেত্রে কি পসিবল অ্যাটলিস্ট 7 ডেজ 24 আওয়ার্স ইন হসপিটাল? এটা যে কত সাইন্টিফিক স্যার, এটা খুব চিন্তার বিষয় স্যার।
এটা তো এখন পলিসি বা ওই হসপিটাল অ্যাডমিনিস্ট্রেশন যেটা মনে করে সেটাই করছে। তবে ডিফিকাল্ট, বিষয়টা ডিফিকাল্ট। 7 দিন ধরে ডিউটি করা, 24 ঘন্টা পড়ে থাকাটা কিন্তু ডিফিকাল্ট আমার কাছে যেটা মনে হয়।
আমি একটু অ্যাড করতে চাই মহসিনের সাথে।
জি স্যার।
তো N95 মাস্ক পরে আমি কাজ করতে গিয়ে দেখেছি সব সময় শ্বাস নেওয়াটা সমস্যা হয় এবং 3-4 ঘন্টা পরে খুব এক্সস্টেড লাগে। সেই ক্ষেত্রে আপনি যে প্রস্তাবটা করেছেন যে ডেইলি 3 থেকে 4 ঘন্টা করে ডিউটি এবং এটা ইন্টারভিউ দেওয়া, এটা অনেক সাইন্টিফিক। এটা আসলে 12 ঘন্টা একটানা ডিউটি করে পিপিই পরে আমাদের এই ওয়েদারে ইট ইজ ভেরি ডিফিকাল্ট, একটা আমাদের বিবেচনায় নেওয়া উচিত।
There is some documentation. The PPA বেশিক্ষণ পড়ে থাকলে বডির অক্সিজেন স্যাচুরেশন ফল করে। There is a documentation. PPA বেশিক্ষণ পড়ে থাকলে অক্সিজেন স্যাচুরেশন বডির ফল করে এবং সেই জন্য কিন্তু ডিজিনেস মাস্ক বেশিক্ষণ পড়ে থাকলে কিন্তু অক্সিজেন স্যাচুরেশন ফল করে। সুতরাং এই বিষয়গুলো কিন্তু খেয়াল করতে হবে। এবং কোভিডের মৃত্যুটা কিন্তু বা ব্রেন ইনজুরি কিন্তু আজকে একটা পেপার দেখলাম সেটা কিন্তু মেইনলি হাইপক্সি, যেটা হাইপক্সিয়ার জন্যই কিন্তু মেইন ডেথ গুলো হচ্ছে এবং হাইপক্সিয়ার জন্যই অর্গানগুলো বেশি ইনজুরি হচ্ছে। হাইপক্সিয়া অনেক সময় থ্রম্বোটিক বলা হচ্ছে কিন্তু মোস্ট অফ দেম আর হাইপক্সিয়ার জন্যই। কাজে এখন আমরা যদি পিপিএ পড়তে গিয়ে আমরা মাস্ক পড়তে গিয়ে যদি হাইপক্সিয়া বানাই তাহলে তো ডিফিকাল্ট। আর ওইরকম সোয়েটিং হইলে রিয়েলি ডিফিকাল্ট। যে প্রশ্নটা আসছে যে শর্টার ডিউরেশনে ডিউটি করা যায় কিনা, এটা তো ম্যানেজমেন্ট ডিসিশন নিবে। প্রত্যেকটা হসপিটালের ম্যানেজমেন্ট ডিসিশন নিতে হবে। এনআইসিবিডি নিজে বসে ডিসিশন নিতে হবে, বঙ্গবন্ধু নিজে ডিসিশন নিতে হবে, প্রাইভেট সেক্টর নিজে ডিসিশন নিতে হবে। এটা গভর্নমেন্ট তো ওইভাবে তো ডিসিশন ইম্পোজ ওইভাবে তো করবে না গভর্নমেন্ট, বা গভর্নমেন্টের সাথে কথা বলে করা যেতে পারে। গভর্নমেন্টকে বলা যেতে পারে আমার এই স্টাফ আছে, আমরা এই কাজ করতে যাচ্ছি, উই ক্যান সেন্ড এ মেসেজ। আমার মনে হয় তাতে কারো আপত্তি থাকার কথা না, বাট ইউ হ্যাভ টু মেইনটেইন দ্য ডিউটি। আর পেশেন্টের সংখ্যাও তো কম এখন হলো কি নাম্বার অফ দ্য ডিউটি ডক্টর তো ইজিলি কমানো যায়, নাম্বার অফ দ্য ডিউটি ডক্টর ইজিলি কমানো যায়।
একটু সবাই আমরা একটু লাস্ট দুইটা কোশ্চেন নিয়ে নিই। থ্যাংক ইউ স্যার। Sir,
thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Last two question. One from the Mohammad Fajan Kovit. He is from Malaysia. He is the assistant professor of Wing University. Fajan Kovit, please one question for the panelist.
I have no questions, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for to comment something over a legendary professor like Prof. Nazrul Islam. So thank you very much for your nice presentation. I just want to add one thing, that in the slides, sir showed that once the heart failure develop, that patient severity rate 5 years or things. And here you see, still in our practice, even in NICBD, Dhaka Medical College, BSM, that when we follow up any patient with heart failure, we use the category of NYHA classification. We don't use that stage A, stage B, stage C, stage D. I think if we can start the practice of using that ACC classification stage, and if we can write down a patient with hypertension, if we can write down in his prescription that you are in stage A heart failure, I think patient will be more careful, because once he is in stage C, and chance of his severity and morbidity and mortality is compared, that means prevention here in heart failure, prevention is should be the key factor for treatment of the heart failure. It should be more proactive. This is my comment. And
Wadud sir, kichu bolben sir? Few comments.
Actually, NYHA actually means functional status, not the heart failure classification. The functional status is NYHA 2, 3, or 4. And yes, I agree with Shah Jahan. Because if we consider that we state in the prescription the patient is in heart failure stage B or stage C, that will put more attention to this fact, and both the future physician who is attending the patient and the patient and their family themselves will be much more aware of the fact that they are in danger. I think he has got a point, very good point. Sir,
basically NYHA classification or even Canadian classification, actually this staging is not denying all these things, because staging to understand the disease pathophysiology and his section, and those functional classifications are the patient severity of disease and the response of the therapy, either pharmacological, non-pharmacological, or device therapy follow-up. NYHA is definitely important. So in all the textbooks and everywhere, this staging and NYHA classification is given on the same page or in the same figure.
Both are important.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Bhavani Logan. Dr. Bhavani.
Yes, doctor.
This last question. Okay.
Yeah, okay, I have one last question. My question is, between ARN inhibitor and AC inhibitor or ARB, which one is better?
Okay, Wadud sir.
Actually, the heart failure studies reach a milestone with the advancement of the ACE inhibitor. Previously, stage 4 heart failure has a death rate of 90%. 1 year survival was 10%. And after that advancement of ACE inhibitor, the death rate starts lowering. Among the ARP, always you will get in all the books, ARPs should be used when the patient have side effect or would not be used due to other reasons. Then the ARP is the choice. And among the ARPs, Valsartan and Candesartan, these two have RCT proven effect in reducing the mortality of heart failure. And ARNI is the next step that has come around to reduce and the heart failure death rate in case of heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. The results so far in case of heart failure preserved ejection fraction is mixed and not clear. Some studies are still going on. I don't know when the results will be available considering the COVID situation. Then we can have some ideas. Sir, do you want to add some
comments?
No,
Sir.
actually, that what he has said is perfect. Odulta said is perfect. Actually, there's no difference between ARB, but since AC inhibitor came in the field, this has improved a lot to the in the side of reduced ejection fraction. And I've shown in our picture the last 3 or 4 decades, the improvement of preserved ejection fraction is not that much marked. Maybe slightly improved, but not that much marked in preserved ejection fraction.
Thank you, sir. We already left 2 hours, sir. Thank you, sir, with us. Professor Wadud, sir, please conclude our session.
My comment should be with 2 lines. তুমি কেমন করে গান করো হে গুনি আমি অবাক হয়ে শুনি আমি অবাক হয়ে শুনি. Nodul sir has always been a fantastic teacher, an extraordinary presenter, and really a fountain of in-depth knowledge. And all this has been manifested into this presentation. As Professor Afzal sir was saying, this is outstanding, extraordinary, astonishing, splendid. I'm just out of all the adjectives that I can use. I'm really submerged in a sense of happiness among this period of despair. After going through this lecture, this experience is actually like a breeze of hope. So thank you, sir, for giving us some hope and giving us the hope that we should learn more, we should achieve more, and we should not despair despite the such a cruel environment of COVID. Thank you, Mohsin.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. We are continuing our class with a little bit short because this is the situation to continue class. We lost our colleagues. Lots of colleagues are in the hospital admitted, but we should go continue our normal activities. So thanks, participants. Around 200 participants, around 200 participants in our class. And thank you, panelists, Professor Afzal sir, Shahabuddin sir, Khandro Kamrul Islam, Nirajush Farid sir, Professor Jalaluddin sir, also here. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Incepta Pharmaceuticals. They are given a job last 1 month. Some of their colleagues also COVID positive. Pray for them. Also, thanks Dr. Arifur Rahman Sajal and as well Professor Abdul Aziz Chaudhary. Our next class will tomorrow. Professor H.L. Utturaman sir on aortic stenosis. Until then, goodbye. Allah Hafiz. Stay safe. Take care. Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, sir.